Thank you. I have, whoa, that seems really loud to me. But I do have one announcement, actually. Dr. Sobi's students, if you want to get credit for being here after the lecture, you need to meet with her on the outside and she'll sign in. Obviously, you know why we're here, to talk about the psychology of love. We're going to look at it through several lenses. We're going to look at it through the science of psychology. So what have we learned about love, looking at it as a discipline? We're going to look at the what causes us to be attracted, what causes us to pair up. How might we be more successful in that? And then we're also going to look at some of the unhealthy parts of pairing up and ways in which we might manage that. And we're also going to look at things like breaking up and divorce, because that's also a part of our lives. And so how does that happen, and how might we manage it better should that happen to one of us? So I want to start with some images. And I want you to imagine or help me think about, are these images of love? Or not? I was prepared, but obviously not quite. Now we'll see. Yes. Love? We hope so, right? They're getting married. It'd be a good time to be in love. How about this? Love? Probably, right? More love? Love? Yep. Ooh, what about this? Yeah, they could be. We have bad days, but maybe not. What about this? Sort of a low rumbling, right? Not sure, maybe. Hopefully not. What about that? So, what is love? We saw some images, and one of the things, clearly, regardless of the last couple too, it's probably fair to say that when we talk about love, we're not talking about one thing. That the kind of love you experience in your life varies. The love that you have for your brother or your sister is different than the love that you have for your boyfriend or your girlfriend, which is different than the love that you have for your grandparents or for your best friend. So one of the things we know in doing factor analysis, and factor analysis is essentially when we take a look at attributes that are present in people's lives, and we can do factor analysis all around anything, but what we look at is people in love, or people who have love, connections between relationships, and what are the categories that emerge over studying thousands and thousands of people who are in loving relationships. Dr. Sternberg is probably the biggest authority. I'm going to bet many of you have seen what I'm going to show you because we cover it essentially in every class. We cover it in general psychology, we cover it in developmental psychology, we cover it in social psychology, maybe not in learning, clearly not in learning. But what Sternberg has told us, again through this factor analysis model, is that there are three elements of love which we can combine in multiple ways. We'll start down here. That you can have love that is based entirely on passion. This is that innate physical attraction to somebody. This is, I want to touch them. I want to have sex with them. I want, depending on their developmental stages, but this is that physical attraction. Intimacy is that kind of love that you have for your best friend, where this is where you share your deepest feelings and emotions, that you can trust this person. If you tell them a secret, they're going to keep it for you. Commitment, Some of the theorists now are adding, which I like, is choice to this, although Sternberg's model uses commitment, but I like the concept of commitment/choice. This is this idea that you are committed to a relationship, that you are choosing to be in the relationship. And there are examples of where that happens, where that only happens. You're choosing to stay married because of the family. You're choosing to stay married because of financial reasons. There are other examples of this. You may not, hopefully, clearly you're not going to have, passion for your elderly grandmother. And you may not have, if you're lucky, you may have, but not everyone can tell their grandmother their deepest secrets, but you will care for your grandmother if she needs it. So we could have any one of these three. But then we can also start having multiple versions of it. Companionate love is where we have both intimacy and where we have commitment. And for most of us, this would be the best friend in our life. That person that we really are committed to them. We're gonna choose to make this relationship to work. I want the relationship to work, and I know that I can trust them emotionally. A romantic love is where you have intimacy and passion, but no commitment. So it may not last very long, but it's a whole lot of fun while it happens. We can travel and share things and just, romp through the hay and do all of those cool things. But, the idea of making it work, once one of those wanes, not so much. Passion and commitment is simply a relationship based on sex. Now, passion isn't just sex, but it really is that emotional connection. Of course, what we're looking for, at least in our culture, is consummate love, where we have all three. The value of having more than one intersection of these is that, as we'll talk about in a few moments, these wane. That in a relationship, passion can come and go. You have children, passion drops. You have a lot of stress at school or work, passion can drop. Intimacy, I just can't talk to this person right now. So what happens is, by having more connections, you increase the probability of the relationship sustaining itself. I want to share with you a singular definition now, which I think cuts through all of the other pieces and makes love a fairly simple measure. This comes from originally the work, the psychologist of Erich Fromm. M. Scott Peck is the one who probably made it most available to the public. Others have used it since then, but defines love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. I love this definition because it makes it really simple to make sense out of, is this a loving relationship? And by spiritual growth, what Peck and Hooks and Fromm and others who use this definition mean is help you connect your life to something bigger than you. Help you grow and develop as a person. Help you have meaning and purpose in your life. Help you find meaning and purpose in your life and have it manifest in your life. And so a loving relationship should do that. Being in a relationship with somebody that is a loving relationship should make you and your partner or your friend a better person. If it's not, then it's probably not love. It may be valuable, but it's probably not love. So, what does love mean? Well, love means knowing the person. That means that we have some level of intimacy. I understand who you are, you understand who I am. That you care about the welfare of the person. You want their life to be better, and you work towards that. That you have a responsibility towards the person. This is part of the commitment piece, that I have a responsibility that your life will be better because I'm part of it, and conversely, I know my life will be. And sometimes responsibility comes down to simple things like, yeah, I'll pick you up after school. I don't want to, but I will. Or I'll take the kids here, or I'll do the laundry, or So there's a responsibility. It's not just about you making me happy. It's about a responsibility to the relationship. That you have respect and dignity for the person. We're going to talk about abuse, physical and emotional abuse later on. Dignity and abuse cannot go hand in hand. Physical and emotional abuse can't be present if love is present. I'm going to make that statement very boldly, and I'm going to come back to it. Physical and emotional abuse cannot coexist with love. Accepting the imperfections. In fact, that's oftentimes how we really know. It's like, I'm willing to share with you those little weird things that I do. And you're going to share them with me because I trust you. And then, again, this idea of spiritual development or moving towards something bigger, growth for both people in the relationship. So, if we've talked about love is, why is it that we have love in our lives? Why is love present? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Number one, it's a survival need. We are social animals. At our core, we have a drive to live in community. Because the fact is, as a species, we are really inadequate. Think about long before there were streets and police officers and things like guns and bows and arrows. As a species, by ourselves, we can't run very fast. We're not very strong. We don't have big teeth. We don't hide well. So we survive through our brains and through coming together as a group. So we have an innate need to live together in community. It's a survival need. Of course, no species survives without creating little ones. So we have a drive not only to live in community, but to pair up and have babies. We've created cultural norms that says that baby process is part of a coupling process. That's okay. Socialization. As part of coupling, we also, in part of living in community of survival, we also have a need to socialize. It's really nice to have somebody there to have dinner with at night. Not just to protect you, should your house break down and you got a bunch of wolves coming at you, going back to survival mode, but we like to talk to people. We want somebody to go to dinner with, to go to the movies with. Somebody that we can show up with to a party. And then lastly, affirmation. This is a really important one because the value of friends and the value of love in our lives, beyond just a survival, is that our friends affirm us. Our friends help us feel good about ourselves. That's one of the primary reasons that we have friends, is to help us make sense out of the world and to help us make ourselves feel good about ourselves. All right. So now, the why. So what causes us to attract? What causes us to get together? Do birds of a feather flock together? Or do opposites attract? One of the big questions, right? One of the big myths that are out there. Well, if you think about these, and particularly this last one, you already know the answer. Because opposites don't make for a very sustaining relationship. Because opposites are not affirming. Talk more about that in a second. So, what are the factors that cause people to get together? There's actually a lot, which is probably why it's hard to really find somebody. Because it's not that simple. There's a whole bunch of contributing factors. One of them is simple proximity. You like the person who sits near you in class more than the people who don't. In fact, there have been multiple studies that have looked at that. Simple proximity causes you to like people more. The closer you are over time to the people. The people who live on your dorm floor, the people who live in your apartment, the people who live in your neighborhood. That's not to suggest you like everybody who lives in your dorm or everybody who lives on your neighborhood or everybody in your classroom. But in general, those people who are closer to you physically, when evaluated, you like more than those who aren't. Interaction. The more you interact with people, increases your likeness for them. If you move to a new neighborhood, a new city, a new school, one of the best things you can do is park near the door. Because what happens is, as you walk into school, you interact with lots of people. Just simple interaction causes us to like people more. Just casual interaction, like, hi, how are you, as you're walking in. And the more you interact with those people, the more you tend to like them. Just the anticipation of interaction. Marvelous little study that was done with adults, and it showed them two same profiles of two different people. And they had them evaluate. So here's a picture, and then here's a whole bunch of characteristics about this person. And two groups got the same profile. But in one, the independent variable was, in one of them they were told, and you're going to meet this person next week. And then they had them evaluate how much they liked this person. Now they hadn't met him yet, right? They're just, here's a sheet, here's the picture, here's the profile, here's the qualities, the attributes of this person. Exact same one. Except in one group they were told, you're going to meet this person next week. Guess what? Those who were told they were going to meet the person next week liked the person in the profile more than those who weren't told they were going to meet the person. So simply anticipating that you're going to meet the person actually increases how much you like them. The mere exposure effect, which is in part a combination of these, the more you're exposed to a phenomena, whatever it is, the more you like it. Advertising, people, doesn't matter, songs. If you think about most songs that you really like, the first time you heard it, not so great. But you start hearing it over and over and you start liking it more. Now, yes, there are songs that you get sick of, right? It's like play it over and over, don't play that anymore. But here's the thing. Even when you don't like it anymore because you heard it so many times, you still like it more than the first time you heard it. So while your likeness might decrease because it's become obnoxious, and then over a period of time, like 10 years later, you hear it and you like it again. So simply being exposed to something, simply being exposed to a person causes you to like them more. And there's more. I said, it's really hard to figure out how you're going to actually couple up with somebody. Exclusionary criteria. See, it's not just what draws us to people, but every one of you has an exclusionary criteria. Every one of you has some certain things that you will not accept in a partner. So it's not, and in fact, it's more powerful than what you want in a partner. So you have a little list, right? Like what? It doesn't have to be for you, but what might some of these things be? Can't have kids. Well, for some, and that's fair. I mean, it changes over time, right? I mean, that doesn't work when you're 40 and divorced, and it's like when I've got 3 kids, but I don't want to marry somebody who has kids. Obviously, over time, it changes. But in some, I don't want kids. I want to have my own. Facial hair. Don't want somebody who has facial hair, especially my wife, right? Smoker. I don't want somebody who smokes. Now, if I do smoke, then I want somebody who's accepting of smoking or who does smoke. A couple more. Money. You want somebody who doesn't have money? So you want somebody who has a stable career. One more. You don't want somebody who has extremely different religious beliefs. So what happens is we have this list. Now you got to be careful. Well, your list might be rather long, 8, 10, 12, right? If you really, really, really don't prioritize it around 3 or 4, just be happy being lonely. Because you know, if your list is really long, 8, 12, then you're a little picky. Okay, similarity. This is one of the primary issues for any kind of long-term relationship. And if you think about it intuitively, you know it's true. If part of the reason for coupling is to affirm us, then people will only affirm us if they're like us. And even just on a daily basis, if you think about it, you're somebody who likes to stay at home at night, you like to read, you don't really like to party. Well, how well is it going to work if you couple up with somebody who wants to go out every night? They want to hit the clubs. They have their goal aspirations, is to see, how many clubs they can hit in one night, not to study for their abnormal psychology test tomorrow. The long term is just not going to work because you're going to conflict. At the core level, it comes down in part to personality. Are you outgoing? Are you more of an introvert? Do you like exciting, dangerous things? Or do you like the world kind of safe? Farah mentioned religious beliefs. I mean, that's a big part of it. Do you have similar religious beliefs? Do you have similar political beliefs? Similarity is one of the primary factors around long-term success in a relationship. Now, I will give you a caveat. Do opposites attract? For about a day. There's, in fact, we actually, based on smell alone, are attracted to somebody for about a day, if their smell is distinctly different than ours. Why? It's kind of weird, right? So why would smell? What does smell probably indicate? Well, it could, but we're talking about somebody, we all give off a smell, right? Regardless of whether, if we're assuming we're not masking it. Genetic diversity. So as a species to survive, a diverse gene pool is good. So if you're just talking about, basic mating purposes, then we are actually compelled to mate with somebody who's distinctly different from us. The problem with that, and this is where you got to kick in that prefrontal lobe, the problem with that is that it doesn't make for a long-term sustainable relationship. Reciprocal liking. We like people who like us. It's pretty simple, right? If you like somebody or you hear that somebody likes you, you automatically like them more. Again, it's that affirmation thing. Well, if you like me, there must be something really smart about you. You must be brilliant, right? Because you like me. Well, of course, everybody should like me. There are those people who don't. There's something wrong with them. So if we understand, if we believe, they don't even have to like us. If you believe that they like you, because what happens is then and my mind just went blank. What am I thinking of? Some of my students. Come on, you can help me. When you believe something and you act in a certain way. There we go. See? Self-fulfilling prophecy. Can't believe I forgot that. What happens is self-fulfilling prophecy is if you believe somebody likes you, how are you going to behave towards them? In a positive way. And if you behave to somebody in a positive way, they're going to behave back to you in a positive way, and it creates a cycle of liking. This one, let's be honest, you don't know the language for it, social exchange. This has to do with my own belief of self and my relationship with others, which is, what kind of partner do I believe I deserve? Every one of us, based on our own experience, our self-esteem, our ideals, we have a belief about what kind of partner do I deserve. So is this person above that or below it? And in fact, they have to be sort of in a reasonable zone, because if they're too far above it, well, I don't really deserve it, and this probably isn't going to work. If they're too far below, then it's, well, I deserve better than this. That's the first criteria. Now, the second one is, and of course nobody wants to admit this, right? But we do this. What's the possibility of finding somebody better? All right, so we're dating right now. We've been dating for a while. Should I settle or hold out for somebody better? What's the probability that somebody, you have this conversation in your head. Now, you may not have it explicitly, but it is like, okay, is this going to work for me? It's very practical. All right. The last criteria that I want to talk about, and we don't want to, it's another one of these things, well, I'm attracted to their personality. Well, no. We are attracted to attractiveness. Now, it's a little complicated here. Babies spend more time looking at culturally attractive faces than unattractive faces. People who are artificially disfigured, and in fact, if we had somebody in this room right now, and I took had a theater department and had them artificially disfigured, and they were sitting here, people wouldn't sit around them. People sitting on this experiment was done in New York, having people on a subway train, and they had like a big scar or something. People would not sit by them. We migrate towards attractive people. Now, what does that mean? Well, there is culturally attractive, some of these folks here. And they're popular because they're culturally attractive. In fact, we associate attractiveness with all positive qualities. We assume that attractive people are smarter. We assume that attractive people do better things for the world, that they get in trouble less. In fact, we assume that they are less promiscuous. In every study that's been done, it shows that we believe that ugly people actually have sex in an inappropriate way more than attractive people. So we attribute all good things to attractive people, which is why they're more successful because they should be, right? Now, what does attractiveness mean, though? Because there is a cultural norm, which essentially means that you have a baby face, that you have a face that is symmetrical, that both sides are essentially the same. Big eyes, high cheekbones, small nose in proportion to your face. You have an attractive mouth. And there's a slight variation between men and women. And here's what's interesting. When you do surveys of women and men and women, men are right up front in placing attractiveness in their top 3. Women place it lower on their scale, 5, 6, 7, 8. But in fact, when you evaluate women's behavior, it's no different than men. So women say attractiveness doesn't matter, but in fact, when you evaluate their behavior, it does. But now is where it gets more complicated. This woman is oftentimes in several studies, and there's several variations of this, when given a whole group of random pictures. In fact, this study was done with winners of the Miss German contest, so equivalent of the Miss America. It's been done with Miss Americas too. I just happen to have the picture of Miss Germany. So people are shown a whole bunch of pictures of all of the women who ran for Miss Germany. And this woman is picked out as being the most attractive, overwhelmingly. This woman doesn't exist. This woman is the average features of all of the other women. So interestingly enough, we like common qualities. Now it even gets more interesting. See these 2 pictures here? That's the same person. In a wonderful little experiment, this only worked with heterosexuals. So in this case, you have the real person, and then here you have the person morphed into a woman, so computer-generated woman. And this was done with a whole bunch of pictures of different people. And it was done both with men and women. It's done both ways, and that's why you have to be heterosexual, because if you morph a man into a man, you can pick yourself out, right? So what happened is then they were flashed a bunch of different pictures of women. Statistically, they always picked themselves as being the most attractive. So what happens is we actually are attracted to people who look like us. This is true for our mates. I'm not going to end up with her. I know that's true. Of course, I'm married, so it'd be a real problem if I did. But what happens is that we tend to pick people. If we take this sort of, we create a rubric here from 0 to 10. Well, let's say 1. Give nobody a 0 around attractiveness. 1 to 10. And we then, if you're a 7, you're going to pick somebody who's probably in the 6, 7, 8 range. We pick people who are close to us. Now I know what you're thinking, right? Oh, damn, all my friends are ugly. Oh, well, it's statistically true. That doesn't mean there isn't some aberrations here and there. So we tend to pick people who are similar. This is really easy to figure out. Go to the mall. Watch those gaggle of teenagers running around. They all look alike, right? I mean, they're all within the same sort of zone of beauty. So, why do we get together? How do we get together? And how do we stay together? Well, it starts when we're very young. It starts with our experience in being taken care of when we're born. Many of you understand you've had attachment theory in other classes, but I'll take a moment to explain it very simply. So what happens is when you're born, you are at the whim of your caretakers. You innately are attracted to your caregivers, physically and emotionally. Based on those first couple years of life, and there's an optimal window that can be extended, we'll talk about that in a second, you have 3 basic, and these are sort of the broad categories, you develop as a child and then eventually as an adult, 3 basic forms of attachment. You have secure attachment. Secure attachment is where I feel good about other people and I feel good about myself. I trust myself in relationships. I trust other people in relationships. Anxious ambivalent is that I feel good about other people, but not so much about myself. That I'm highly anxious that people are going to hurt me, that they're going to leave me. I don't have a very strong sense of self. And avoidant is I don't feel good about other people. I don't trust other people. So these patterns develop when we're very young. We've got some really nice research that's come out of adoption studies that looks at children who are in a very stark, non-nurturing environment, because it's just not food. It's both physiological and emotional care. What this looks like then as an adult is that this is the clingy, jealous, please don't leave me, I'll do anything to make you happy person. Because my internalization is, I'm not worthy of a relationship. And you're going to leave me, I know it, so I have to do whatever I can to keep you. Avoidant is, I don't really care if we have a relationship or not. I'm not going to come, I'm not going to come home tonight. I know I said I was going to come home, but I'm just not. I'm going to hang out at the bar. Well, what are you so upset about? Don't worry about it. These are not absolutes, because that's an important piece. What happens is while there is a critical period in those early years, what happens if you end up as an adult and you're in one of these situations? Well, obviously it's going to be difficult to have relationships, but that isn't to suggest that you can't revisit and reconsider your relationship with yourself and your relationship with other people. We do know, and again, that's where the adoption studies have been quite helpful, is that we know that people with a lot of effort can revisit and reorient their attachment style. It's not easy. It's much easier to have it happen in those first 18 months, 3 years. But the opposite can happen too. I mean, you could have a very secure attachment style and then just have a series of really, really, really crappy relationships, which causes you to start questioning your value as a partner, or has you start questioning the ability to trust others. Equity. We want to feel like we are in an equal relationship, that there is equity in our relationships. There are two forms of equity. You have the early equity. So when you first start a relationship, you're in a tit-for-tat relationship, which means I'm going to keep a score sheet. In my mind, okay, you paid this time, I'll pay that time, I cleaned your apartment, what did you do for me? And it really is a tally sheet in those early relationships. I don't want to get abused. So let's look for equality, and we're very specific about it. Now, healthy long-term relationships grow from an exchange to a communal relationship. In a communal relationship, I no longer keep score, but I still want equity, but I recognize through experience, through time, that okay, if I do the laundry this week, then next week I know that you're going to be doing, I trust that you're going to be, taking the kids to soccer practice, or if I, go to your parents' house, and which of course is never a good time, but I recognize that you'll probably then, take me out to dinner, or I mean, it's always personal. How do you define equality? But long-term successful relationships evolve into a community relationship. In fact, one of the ways to measure the maturity and the predictability of success of a relationship is simply looking at this. If the couple is still keeping a score sheet, then they haven't developed into a mature relationship. And again, it's okay, we all start out at that level. But if you've been together for a few years, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, and you're still keeping a score sheet, then this really isn't the kind of nurturing relationship that you deserve. Self-disclosure. Obviously, self-disclosure is based on the attachment theory, because self-disclosure is sharing with your partner your secrets. Now, not all secrets. Some of those things we're not going to tell anybody. Not that they're terrible, just got to keep something secret. But your beliefs, your goals, when you get hurt, when you don't. Because what that does is create intimacy. And I didn't talk about it earlier, but intimacy tends to be the primary focus of the most healthy relationships. And it does speak to that nurturing, right? I mean, you can't nurture without intimacy. Intimacy breeds passion. The biggest sex organ you have is your prefrontal lobe, is your head. And so intimacy attracts you to the person. Intimacy creates commitment. Because if that's a special person. We don't have many people in our lives that we are deeply intimate with. That's really dangerous. So if I find that person, then I'm committed to them. I'm moving towards commitment because I want to keep them. So self-disclosure is an important part of success. And lastly, acceptance. Interesting piece of data that shows that successful, happy couples tend to wear rose-colored glasses when talking about their partner. They tend to evaluate their partner, and they're not unrealistic, but a little bit less harsh than the rest of the world. They believe positive things. They interpret the behaviors of their partner in slightly more positive ways than other people do. It's not a lie. All of it's interpretation. They just have a slightly positive not unrealistic, but a slightly positive interpretation of their partner. Okay, here's a sad reality. When are you most happy in your marriage? The day you're married. It goes downhill every day after that. And it bottoms out around 5 years old. You need to know this. You really need to know this because many people don't. That happiness is at its height when you first married. You heard of the 7-year itch, right? Pretty common. It's actually true. Not as true as we believe it to be, but what happens is if you hit the bottom at about 5 years, well, it takes you a couple of years to have that affair. Not quite, but it does slowly start to climb up. Now, if those people who have children, somewhere out here, when children leave, it also takes another bump upward. It never gets back up to here. Sorry, it's just one of those things you got to know. So, what do you want to do? What do you need to do to sustain your relationship? Well, be aware that passion and intimacy naturally wane. It's not that you're wrong with the wrong person, it's just the nature of love. So, the passion that was there last week maybe isn't there this week. Maybe it's gone for, until the kids are 7. Situations cause them to go up and down, which is why, again, having multiple points on the triangular theory is useful. Do things that are exciting. Even if you have children, find ways in which you can do common things, just the two of you, even if it's only for a weekend, things that you enjoy doing. This is avoid scorekeeping. This is that checklist. Long-term successful relationships evolve to where you no longer keep score. Constructive communication styles, share your wants and your needs. Learn how to communicate. There's a whole process. I'm not covering it here, but there's a whole, and many of you have been taught it or you've seen it. There's a theoretical model for good communication in a relationship. Understand that outside stresses can impair relationships. Reach out in love when your mate is under stress. Remember that the environment affects us. It's going to affect your relationship. If your partner is having difficulties at work, difficulties at school, difficulty with parents, difficulty with children, it's not a reflection on you. It might feel like it because they're angry, they're stressed, they're sad. It's not you. So understand that your partner, just like you, is affected by the outside world. A little data about unhappy couples. Unhappy couples have a higher ratio of negative to positive comments. In fact, here's the thing, folks. For every one bad thing you say, for every one bad action, for every dismissive comment you make, for every one, it takes 5 to bring equality back into the relationship. So, integrate into your relationships lots of positives. And I'm not talking about disingenuine compliments. What we're talking about is simple things. What we're talking about is simply stroking a shoulder. What we're talking about is, thanking them for doing the laundry or for putting out. We're not talking about big things. Big things are good, but what we're talking about is small acts of love, small acts of appreciation. And you really want to have those like part of your life because you got to make up, because I guarantee you every one of us makes negative comments. We say bad things. So we need to have a big pool of positives to survive. Unhappy couples get personally hurtful when they fight. They don't focus on what they're fighting on. They start insulting the person. It's the worst things you can do. Don't berate your partner. engage in repeated demand withdrawal interaction. This is when I want to talk about it and your partner runs away. You've got to create, now that's not to suggest that some people want to talk sooner than others. It's very reasonable to say, you know, I'm really upset about this and I need to take a break. Perfectly fine. But now the person who's taking a break has a responsibility to come back. It says, okay, all right, I'm now calm. I'm not just going to let it slide away. I now, because I asked for the break, have an obligation to return. This is that idea that unhappy couples see their partner through a suspicious lens. So this is obviously the extreme one with affair. This is the opposite of rose-colored glasses. That when your partner does something, whatever it is, you see it as negative. You interpret everything from a negative perspective. And then back to the exchange model. I'll only do this if you do it for me, as opposed to the communal style, which is what we talked about. All right, this is a tough one. This is going to be a tough one because I guarantee, just based on statistics, there are some people in this room who are or who have been in an abusive relationship. Bell Hooks, one of my favorite authors, has a book called All About Love. If you would just want a really good book to read, that's a great book. Bell Hooks is a graduate professor at NYU. She's now teaching at another university by choice. African-American feminist, really nice author. And she takes a theoretical approach to her writing, but it's a personal narrative. So it's very readable, but based in theory. And in her book, she says this: when we understand love as the will to nurture and own another person's spiritual growth, it becomes clear that we cannot claim to love if we are hurtful and abusive. Love and abuse cannot exist. In fact, she goes on to argue that people who abuse don't know how to love. It's not part of who they are. That through their own experience, through their own misinterpretation of their emotions, through lots of things, they have an unhealthy understanding of abuse, of love. American Psychological Association has a white paper on love, on abuse. And it's gone so far as to identify that abuse is just not physical. In fact, one of the things we know from modern brain scan imagery is that children who are physically abused have an abnormal brain, a slightly more primitive. They go to the emotional primitive state as adults quicker than people who weren't physically abused. Children who are emotionally abused have the exact same brain pattern as those who were physically abused. There is no difference in your development between the two. They damage you emotionally the same way. So, verbal abuse, psychological and emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual violence, and the abuse of male privilege, where that we assume that as men we have some power that simply by having a certain genitalia that I get things that you don't. And that you have to serve me emotionally, physically, whatever. All of these qualify as abuse. And I'm not talking about arguing. I'm not talking about not getting along all the time. Argument is part of relationships. And there's a productive, useful way to argue. But argument, when done properly, is a conversation about an issue that we want to resolve. Abuse is me exerting my authority over you, emotionally or physically. So, we're going to come back to abuse. We're going to talk about ending abuse also, but let's talk about ending relationships in general. This is the normal cycle. I'm going to show you another graphic here in a moment what it looks like. But the normal cycle of ending a relationship, and this can be a marriage, it can be a long-term relationship, and it doesn't really matter. The first thing we do is we start focusing on our dissatisfaction. I'm not enjoying the relationship. It doesn't work for me anymore. Then I share it with the partner. I'm not happy. It's not working. Each one of these, as you'll see in the graphic in a moment, you can work through. Then we announce the breakup to others. And then lastly, done in a healthy way, we devise accounts of the breakup. So let's look at this in a graphic. So, I'm not happy, dissatisfied. At some point, the threshold is, I can't stand this anymore. I deserve better, what have you. Now you start going through these stages. You focus on the partner's behavior. You assess the adequacy of the partner. You depict and evaluate negative aspects of being in the relationship. You start considering the cost of withdrawal. You know, if it's been a long-term relationship, are you married? Do you have a house? Do you have kids? You assess the positive aspects of the alternative relationships. Okay, if I leave, what would be good about that? You're essentially doing a cost-benefit analysis. Then you're ready to express my thoughts or repress my thoughts. It's like, all right, yeah, I'm not happy, but it's not worth leaving. I'm not happy, but the cost of leaving is too much. It's going to destroy my children's lives. It's going to financially disrupt us. That can happen. But assuming that you say, no, I've reached the threshold, yep, cost benefit, I'd be justified to leave. Then didactic meaning two, now you confront the issue, confront the partner. You discuss the relationship. Hopefully, you attempt the repair of the relationship and to reconcile. Assuming this doesn't work, as part of it, you're again now assessing the cost. What's going to happen? Then you get to the I mean it stage. This is not uncommon in talking to couples who have been in couples counseling. Almost always one of them will say, I got to a point where I said, it's over, I'm leaving. And the partner says, wait a second, this is real? You meant it? Well, yeah, we spent 12 months in counseling. But it's not uncommon for one person, they're not understanding the scope of this. So once you've said, yep, we're leaving, it's over. Now you got to go public. So you move into the social phase. You negotiate the breakup. You start initiating gossip, you discussion with friends, families, and others, because you want to create a public face. This is why you could never get a true story about who's at fault. Because we're protecting ourselves. We have a psychological need to believe that we did the right thing. So in the initial stage, I'm going to say what I did was right, and I'm going to demonize this person, at least a little bit, if not a lot. And then I'm going to look at, how are my friends reacting? Are they like freaking out, saying, this is stupid, what's wrong with you? Okay, well, maybe it's not the right thing to do. Maybe I missed something. But assuming this goes well, now it's inevitable. Now it's happened. The breakup occurs, the divorce occurs. Now I need to get over it. If I'm intending to be in a healthy relationship after this, I also need to engage what went wrong. Because a relationship is by definition a relationship, which means two people. And so even if it was the right thing to do, even if this is a partner that I needed to leave, I need to evaluate, why was I in this to begin with? So how can I not make the same mistake again? So some of the factors, just got a couple of slides left, couple of factors around the effect of a long-term relationship or divorce. Pre-divorce or pre-breakup, I'm unhappy, but I'm a bit ambivalent. Should we split up? This thinking stage can sometimes be just as stressful because frankly, you know that stress and anxiety comes from a lack of control, a lack of knowing. It's like, I don't know whether I should break up or not. I don't know whether we should separate or not. That's a hard thing to think through. Then, during the separation, the real world changes. The splitting up of friends. Most of us underestimate. What happens is, to emotionally prepare us to split up, we do have to kind of demonize the situation, demonize our partner. When we actually split up, then some of the good things that we didn't think about show up, like, well, I have to eat alone every night now. And even though it wasn't a fulfilling relationship, I had somebody to go to the movies with. I had somebody to share responsibilities with. So you have to deal with those real world situations. The long-term impact, if you have children, then it becomes a chronic stressor. But in some cases, it actually creates self-efficacy. It's like, I really can stand on my own. I don't need to have a partner. I really am capable and deserving of a good life. All right. What about the abusive relationships? What happens here? Well, this is usually one of the most difficult stages. This is a stage of denial that oftentimes people are in when they're in an abusive relationship, which is realizing that hurting someone is never a sign of love. Physical and emotional abuse and love cannot coexist. So you have to first realize that. Then don't think that the violence is just going to stop. No matter how much he or she, and it's usually unfortunately a he, although sometimes it is a she, no matter how many times they promise they won't do it again, it's not just going to magically stop. What we're talking about is a deep-rooted issue within that person. That's not to suggest that they can't rethink their behavior, but it's not just going to magically disappear. Then the person to leave needs to reach out to others. Friends, families, counselors, resource centers. Grand Rapids Community College, for those of you who are students, and if you find yourself or you believe you're in this kind of relationship, you can go right to the counseling office. They will meet with you. They will help you think through it. They will provide free counseling for a period of time. They will help you connect to outside resources. So for those of you who are a student, you have resources if you're in that situation. Make a plan. So if you're living together, if you're financially tied together, if you have children, think through, and that's where the others can help you. And then leave. Seek protection. Sometimes it's legal protection, sometimes it's just physically moving in a place where the person doesn't have access to you. And then again, assess and learn from the experience. Why were you in that to begin with, and how can you do things differently? Okay, lastly, you want to be in a relationship. So we'll end in a positive note, not a negative, downer. So what can you do to find love? What can you do to find a healthy relationship? Well, first and foremost, you have to believe that you can and should be loved. Your self-talk, your belief about you as a human being should say, I'm worthy of love. In fact, I'm a pretty damn good catch. Somebody deserves me, and I deserve somebody equally good. Work on yourself. Feel good about yourself. Be the best person you can be. Present your best self. Because when you do that, when you work on yourself, you build a sense of self-efficacy. You build a sense of self-efficacy. At the same time, you build a sense of high self-esteem. You have a high self-esteem, then at that point you say, I'm worthy of having a good relationship. Be around. Guess what? Nobody's going to show up at your apartment and ask you out. Not going to happen. Now, you're lucky, most of you, because you're in college. A lot of people around. When you're older, then you've got to make an effort. Join church groups. Go on, take classes. Whatever it takes to be around people. Because again, remember what causes us to find somebody? Gotta be around people. Show interest in people. Not like I do, as those of you who know me, it's like, I show a lot of interest, but I like to look at people, do that psychologist thing, which usually causes people to run away. I'm talking about showing genuine interest in the person. Ask them about their life. What do they believe? What do they like? I love these two. Most people believe if you want somebody to like you, you should do something for them, right? Do something nice for them. The opposite is actually true. If you want somebody to like you more, you want to convince them to do something for you. It's basic cognitive dissonance theory, is that if you ask somebody to take you home, and they don't have to take you home, it's a choice, right? Here's what goes on in their head. All right, I just drove 20, they're not thinking it out loud, but unconsciously, non-consciously, they're thinking, I just went 20 minutes out of my way to take this person home. I didn't have to do that. I chose to do it. I'm a good, smart person. My time's valuable. So why would I do that? Oh, I must like them, because I wouldn't do it. That'd be stupid if I did it for somebody I didn't like. So in fact, the psychology is when people do something for you, they actually like you more. Now, I'm not talking about manipulating people. Let me be kind and gentle. Here's another one. Do something exciting. If you have a choice between going to a horror flick and a romantic comedy, go to the horror flick. Misattribution of emotion, or go on a roller coaster ride. It's really good. Because what happens is that an emotional state, when you go to something scary like a roller coaster or a horror flick, and that's assuming that it's not putting them over the edge where they're freaked out. But what happens is you get a little bit afraid. That's the same physiology as love. Heart rate, body becomes flushed, adrenaline starts flowing. What happens is then a little bit of that biology spills over to the person you're with. That we misattribute some of that physiology towards the person causing it. Make it equal. This is really important. This is important for two reasons. Number one is it creates that tit-for-tat relationship. The other piece of is it actually empowers you. Psychologically, you know that if the person that you're going out with is always buying the meals, always paying for things, always driving, you cognitively, consciously or unconsciously, feel a need for equality. Which means then you have to figure out ways, well, how can I make this relationship equal? This person's giving me all this stuff. What am I going to do to make it equal? Well, you might end up doing something you really don't want to do. So make it equal right from the gate. And then lastly, you know what? Take a chance. I guarantee you're going to get your heart broke. At least most of us have, right? At some point. That's part of the process. That's part of the learning. In fact, one of the things we talk about is successive approximation towards your goal, towards your success. I'm going to bet almost everybody in this room, if you think about the very person you dated, you are really thankful that you didn't end up with that person. But that was a learning experience. Like, okay, I'm taking a shot in the dark. Oh, that doesn't really work, does it? So you learn from that, though, and then the next person was a little closer. And then the next person a little, and eventually you hone in on that right person. But that means taking a chance. That means understanding that you are capable of standing heartbreak. And in fact, you will learn and grow from it. Okay, now it's time for questions, answers, thoughts, reflections. What do you want to know?
Clarification of similarity. You mentioned all similar behaviors, but not similar interests.
Yeah, the question is, and I'm going to repeat the question because this is being recorded for YouTube and the account. Question of similarity. It basically starts with personality, and then it builds up from there. So values, principles, behaviors. Personality comes first because our behaviors come from our personalities. Our expectations, our desires come from our personality. Family values, it's more difficult for people who are different socioeconomic background to pair. It's not to suggest they can't if they have other similarities. But basically, if you think about all of the things that make you a person, from what your personality is, from the things you do on a daily basis, your educational goals, where you want to live, all of those things, the more similar, they don't have to be 100%, but the more similar, the more likely you are to sustain a relationship.
All right.
What else? No, I can't believe you don't have questions.
Have you seen the movie Dopamine?
I have not. The question if I have seen the movie Dopamine, I have not.
I was just wondering if you've seen it and what your take is.
Since I haven't seen it, I don't have a take.
What do you recommend when there is an emotional attraction but not sexual attraction?
That's a really good friend. I mean, the question is when you have an emotional attraction but no physical attraction, that's an opportunity for just a marvelous friendship. Now, the thing is that the data would actually suggest that if it is, if you're attracted, you know, if you're heterosexual and it's a woman, or if you're homosexual and it's a man, the data would suggest that the emotional attraction, assuming that it is shared, will eventually, or could eventually, evolve into a passionate and a committed relationship. If it doesn't, then you have a marvelous good friend.
How about to make it equal? What is the financial status? It's a little bit different.
Yeah, the question is, how do you make it equal when financial status is different? Well, that's when you get to a communal relationship. What you're looking for is the totality of equality. What you're looking for is, yes, because in most cases you're going to have some unequal financial relationships. So the question is, how does the person feel, both of them, and does the person feel like there's some balance that's happening to make it equal? So finance can actually be quite complicated if one person feels like I'm making all the money and you're not making any effort to make the money. But you could also have a situation is that, yes, you're living your dream and you're doing what you really want to do. I'm living my dream. We're nurturing each other spiritually. And along with that, you provide for me an emotional foundation. You provide for me these things that allow me to make the more money. You create a foundation for me to make that. You have to, in a communal way, feel that there's equality.
So would you say that love is a choice?
Absolutely. Love is a choice. We choose to love. Is there a biological attraction to mate? Yes. I mean, that's survival of the species. But love is a choice. And most theorists in love theory would argue that we choose to love. And by choosing to love, it actually empowers us. It actually allows us to say, hey, I don't have to be abused, or I don't have to have inequality, and I deserve to be nurtured. So yes, I absolutely believe love is a choice.
So like you were saying earlier, like if you do have a relationship and you start kind of losing like the passion, is that
Right.
that can be normal and not always symbolize like the end of the relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. The question is if you're in a relationship and you start losing the passion, is that normal, or does it symbolize the waning of the end of the relationship? And the answer to that is, I guarantee you, in any long-term relationship, that you're going to see passion decrease. Not necessarily long-term, but there are going to be periods of time when the passion will decrease. You know, and sometimes it's situational. When you've got a 2-year-old baby, you know, screaming and spitting up food and stuff, it's really hard to be sexy. And it's not just about sexy, but, you know, I mean, or again, you know, if you've got exams, if you're worrying about money, you know, if you've got an unhealthy parent, then stressors decrease our sexuality. In fact, one of the things we also know, it's cyclical. And I mean, there's so much research, and I didn't have time to share it all. It was a marvelous study that looked at women's apparel when they are ovulating versus when they're menstrual cycle. Women show more skin when they're ovulating than when they're in their menstrual cycle. And even if you have them to like dress themselves, like have little cartoons and then, you know, like draw clothes, they draw less clothes on themselves when they're ovulating So even in a month, there's a cycle. And men have similar cycles. So yeah, you're going to expect it on a monthly, yearly, and a lifetime basis. That's where the other sustains it. And what you find then, if you do those other qualities, like find things that you do together that you enjoy, it allows you to rekindle the passion, assuming that it was there at one point.
Obviously, in relationships, there's going to be disagreements and arguments about differences that you have, whether
Yes.
beliefs or values. What would you say is the healthy way, I guess, to go about those differences? Like agree to disagree, or do you think
The question is about how to engage in healthy argument, which is a very important piece. Number one, first and foremost, is you remember that you love this person. First and foremost, you have to keep in your mind that you love this person. Secondarily, you view argument as a way to problem solve. So if you view it as a way to problem solve, then you focus on what's bothering you. Honestly, what's bothering you? And so you speak from an I statement about, when you do this, this is what I feel. Here's what's so you don't say, when you do that, I can't believe you would do that. You also, again, you don't berate the person. You never berate the person, but in arguments, it's easier to do. You don't go to past events, 3 years ago, last week. So what you want to do is to focus, and you want to genuinely listen to the person and try and understand what are they upset about? What's causing them to feel this way? So the best way to think about it is you focus not on the person, but the issue at hand. Remember, first and foremost, that you love the person. Because again, if you love the person, why would you insult them? Why would you intentionally want to make them feel bad?
What's the best way to go about continuing a relationship after you've broken up, but you want to get back together?
The question is, how do you continue a relationship after you've broken up and you want to get back together? Who wants to get back together? Both people? Then what you need to do is, and this is where we get in trouble with love, same thing, we get in trouble with all kinds of human things like sex, whatever, is the first thing you need to do is to approach it somewhat scientifically, somewhat problem solving, which is to have a conversation about why didn't it work to begin with? What was it that caused us to break up to begin with? What about me? What about you? What about us? And then entertain the question, so what's different today? Is anything different today? Because if it's not, while you might want to get back together, it's just not going to happen. So you have to poke it in a very analytical way, which we don't like to do with love. Analytical love? No, it's just supposed to be bells and whistles and, little cupids running around. You just have to be very honest about it. Can people be friends after they break up? Well, again, it depends on the intensity of the relationship. It depends on why they broke up. It's really hard because there is an emotional piece that ties into it. It does happen, but it's really difficult. Now, if you have children, then you need to work towards it very strongly because, it is a bumper sticker, behave for the children. That's absolutely true. And so the more you can work towards problem solving, but it's really difficult to do.
Are you familiar with the word limerence?
Limerence, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to tell me what it is?
I just wanted to know, the definition of
Okay.
Do you believe long-distance relationships?
This is another one of those interesting pieces. Distance does not make the heart grow fonder. Distance makes the eyes wander. I'm not suggesting it can't work, but number one, you have to recognize that it's not easy, that it is painful and difficult. And you need to find ways. Now, there needs to be a very specific reason. So if your partner is in Iraq, and you know that he or she's going to be there for a period of time, there's a reason for it. It makes it a lot easier to justify it. But because of what your partner provides you, like the passion part, most people can manage fairly well, but it's the intimacy piece that we really need. It's that affirming piece that we really need. It's why we have this person in our lives. So If it's long distance, there needs to be a reason, and I need to understand the duration of it, at least a ballpark duration, and I have to work really hard to keep that intimacy connection alive, because that's why I've got this person in my life. Can guys and girls just be friends? Sure. You can be, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult because intimacy, remember, can evoke passion. So you have to make a choice about, all right, for situational reasons, for cultural reasons, whatever, I'm going to make a choice to have these. Now, it is difficult because of that nexus of, when we have emotional connections, it oftentimes will evoke physical connections. But it can be done. Yes. The question is, if there's boredom in the relationship without children, do I think the passion will ever come back? Assuming that you have intimacy and commitment, then yeah, you can typically spark passion. One of the things you need to do is have a conversation about it, to be honest about it. And then do things that you enjoy together. Not focused on the passion part necessarily, but do some things that really creates excitement in the both of you. And then oftentimes you can take that excitement, again, it's sort of that misattribution of emotion, and transfer it. So if there's something that you both really enjoy doing, spend time doing it. And when you get those good feelings about the behavior, you can take that and transfer it into passion. Only if you're focused entirely on the passion. If the passion is all that I'm really interested in, that's the dominant. I mean, there's certainly in many relationships are that way. It's the 6 weeks of passion, and then it's over. But it's not to suggest that a relationship that originates with passion couldn't evolve into more. It's more likely that the opposite occurs, that intimacy and commitment evolve into passion, than the opposite.
How would you suggest equalizing your time between your partner and your child? Like one of them being jealous.
How do you equalize your time between your partner and your child so one of them doesn't get jealous? Well, the point here is the issue of jealousy. Neither one of them should get jealous. I mean, this is one of those committed pieces of a relationship. Children at times take far more time than you want to give them. But that's just the commitment to raising a child. And so part of that is an honest conversation about, because I'm spending time here doesn't suggest that I don't want to spend time with you, but it's one of those honest analytical pieces that we need to be doing this right now. And I will commit that we can commit to finding ways in which we can be together. So it may be, the weeks are really bad, but what we can do is, how about let's get grandma to watch the child, and then we're going to spend 4 hours. If we're really lucky, maybe we can get a night somewhere. Part of it's just that open honesty, and part of it is an acceptance by both partners that when you have children, you don't get equal time. And that's just a reality.
Dating someone that is not mature as you are, you still make it work?
With dating someone who is not as mature defined as
Mentally, type of thing.
emotionally, or, well, again, that gets back to that similarity issue. Maturity, it would be a measure of similarity. So if you are mature-wise or developmentally at very different levels, it's going to be hard to sustain the relationship, because it's going to be hard. You're going to have different goals. You're going to see the world in different ways. You're going to have different experiences. So maturity is one of, now if you have lots of other similarities, then you may be able to balance it out. But nonetheless, that is one of those similarity rubrics. I'm trying to move so I can see you. The question is, what does it mean when you're outgoing, but when you get around your partner that you just freeze up? I'd want to know why. I mean, if your innate personality is one to being outgoing and social, and then why is that? And that really is who you are. I mean, if you look at the rest of your life and that's really how you behave, then it would be a red flag for me. Why is it that my behavior is significantly different when I'm with my partner? Because what you want is a relationship that doesn't change who you are, but in fact enhances who you are. That accepts your core personality, your core way of being, and then provides you with a relationship, with an environment that in fact allows that part to grow and develop more. So I'd be asking some real questions about what is it about this relationship that causes me to behave? Is it me? Am I putting forth a false self because I think I need to please this person and that's not really accurate? Is it the person who's saying, if you don't behave this way, I'm not going to love you? I'd really focus on that dynamic and wonder what's going on here. Because who I am when I'm with my other friends and who I enjoy being ought to be the same person that you would see when you're with your partner.
What should you do in a situation where, like, you're a little bit more withdrawn and the other person is just extremely needy to the point of where it's like unsufferable?
Well, then we're getting back to personality issues. I mean, attachment issues. You know, and it's certainly possible that, you know, you've got a person who has that anxious personality disorder that, in fact, they really need to work on themselves. They really need to understand that they are capable of being loved, that they are capable of being in a relationship. They deserve to be in a relationship. There's nothing that we can do for somebody else. They can only do it for themselves. And so in every given situation, part of our continuing evaluation is, does this meet the definition of love? I mean, all relationships have costs. Any relationship we have, there is a cost-benefit ratio that we're constantly sort of evaluating. Am I giving more than I'm receiving? And that's the question. So I can't make my partner become somebody else. If that person that he or she happens to be is not allowing me to grow and develop, and that person and we as a couple are not willing to work on it and grow and develop, then that's sort of the criteria that it probably shouldn't be together anymore. If the person is willing to work on it and understands where that insecure attachment comes from, and I'm just doing armchair analysis here, then it's worth the investment. It's worth sticking in and seeing how that will evolve over time.
Let's say that you've been together for about 8 years and it's continuing to cycle and it's never changed.
Well, then you really start getting into that evaluation model about the cost of staying and cost of leaving.
Kind of to that same question, how involved should you be in someone's process of like fixing or changing their behavior?
You shouldn't be.
Change for you at all, but if you're with the person, they're going to change. You bring them to identify with themselves and try to put it back together later. Or
Well, that's part of the nurturing process. Remember, you can't make anybody change. They can choose to work on themselves, and they can invite you to be part of the process. So as they are continuing to grow and develop themselves, they can invite you to help them do it. You could be an aid, but it's at an invitation. What you can't do is to evoke change in somebody else, to make somebody else change, to try and create an environment where they will change. It's just not going to fly.
Coming from the other perspective, if you're the person trying to change, you shouldn't expect your partner to help you out with that.
No, I said you can invite them. Absolutely. That's the definition of love. Because when I'm talking about change, I mean, all of us are growing and developing if we're lucky. And part of love is having a person that is part of that growth and development. But you invite them to do it. They don't push it on you.
It's like a long-term marriage, your partner will change. And one of the changes is something that you really love is being the other part you don't like to change. How do you
Well, again, I mean, the question is you're in a long-term relationship and marriage, in fact, and your partner is growing in a way that you don't want. Well, what we would suspect is that somewhere along the way there was a breakdown in communication and a breakdown in mutual development, moving towards a similar path, which means that there actually were different values, different experiences that start manifesting themselves over time. We can only hold things in so long. And eventually, if it's a false self that you bring to a relationship, eventually that authentic or true self is going to show up. And so, and that's when we start seeing a migration. Again, you have to be somewhat analytical and you have to be somewhat problem solving about it. It's like, okay, this isn't working for me anymore. Where you're at and where I'm at is no longer functional. So what can we do? Can we do anything to start developing some mutual development, becoming more parallel versus divergent? Not everyone's going to have relationships where you overlap, where you are the same person growing in the same direction. But there's always going to be some separation, but you want some kind of parallel. So again, just be honest about it. Talk about it. Say, you know, for my own growth and development, here's where I'm headed. And this is where I see you going. And if it continues down this path, we're not going to be together. So what can we do to bring it back together? Do you want to bring it back together? I mean, that's part of the question, because sometimes the person says, no, I'm happy the way it's going. Then that's where you get into that, you know, unhealthy, not unhealthy, unhappy. So one more question.
Seems that, like, for a lot of people, they can't define love, but you seem to have been able to define love in a very practical sense and in a science. Do you think it's that exact, or, you know, like, what part of it do you think, or percentage-wise, is like the unexplainable, like, fuzzy feeling and the emotional aspect?
I think it's that exact from a practical perspective. That's not to suggest, you know, that the butterflies, I mean, those are great. I mean, who doesn't want those, right? But there's still a practical component of it, that it's not, for your own growth and development, you can't have butterflies every day. You can't have butterflies probably, you know, new ones every year, because that means you're having lots of relationship. You know, Sternberg's and Erich Fromm's definition has been, you know, this has been around a long time. People have evaluated Sternberg's model. There are thousands of studies that have looked at this to suggest this really, at least in our culture, there are some variations between different cultures, but in Western society, it's a pretty robust model. And it does help us make sense out of and understand. That's not to suggest that there, you know, in so many things, there is that undefinable part of being human. That works very parallel with this more objective, analytical piece of it. You just enjoy the ride of the emotional part, but don't let it dominate you. And the more you look at love as a mystery that's undefinable, then it's really hard to say, but if there's a problem, I can fix it, or that I can expect these things out of it. It's like so many human conditions that there are pieces that are in fact manageable and definable. Thank you.